Welcome to episode number 5 of Politics. I am Bowman Talbot. Today I'm joined by our resident European, Alex, as well as our favorite cast member from Ohio.
Ryan Brady, hello.
Yes, so today our first topic is the Democratic debates that happened last week. Alex?
Yeah, so Wednesday night you had the Democratic debates happening in Atlanta, Georgia, and they covered a whole range of topics. And I feel like if we set it out like this, if we talk about each candidate and how they did and the interactions that they had, I feel like that's how we will be covering the debate night. So I feel like it would be fair to start with one of the front runners. That would be Vice President Joe Biden. Um, I'm going to be honest. Every time he comes on the debate stage, he just always does something that isn't great. Um, in, yeah. Uh, for example, this time in relationship to his policy on domestic violence, he used a very interesting metaphor on
We're
how
gonna
to
punch
how
it. We're gonna punch it out of
punch it.
him.
Yeah, we're gonna keep punching, keep punching, keep punching. It was a very unfortunate choice of words, especially in the way that, especially given Biden writing the domestic violence bill in the Senate, and it is very unfortunate for him to be put in such a position. The thing is, he puts himself in that position, and like there are some other people who are talking about how the people online talking about how maybe if Biden didn't come out on debates and wasn't out in the public and was just stayed in Delaware, that he would do a better job than he is now. Like all he's doing, he's been gradually just like dropping in the polls, and he, gonna be honest, he's not looking in great shape. What do you guys think? What do you think of his
I think
performance?
it's I think it's interesting because like you're saying, he definitely is like consistently kind of messing up or slipping up, and it's not good for his image. And I think that as a country and as a world, we understand the ramifications now of having a president who might not be the best at communicating or might be very like I mean, we all know Trump like through Twitter and stuff, and sometimes he says things that don't come out the right way unless that's how he means to say them, which in any case is not good. So I think it definitely has a very big like consequence on how people view him like presidentially. Like if we think that he's not like a stately representative of our nation or someone who can really like hold his own in negotiations, like I think we all know now like what effect that will have on our country, and we don't really want to go into that again.
Well, not only his blunder with the Violence Against Women Act, and the keep punching domestic violence. He also said that he was endorsed by the only
Mm-hmm.
female African
Oh
American
yeah.
senator, and he forgot he was standing next to Kamala Harris, who was the second. So it just seems like Biden is very out of touch, and it's very obvious, in my opinion, that his age is showing, and that he was kind of banking really hard on the fact that he was Obama's vice president, and since Obama was
Mm-hmm.
such a popular president with the Democratic Party, he thought he could just kind of soar to the nomination, and it's been proven that that's not true. He was hoping to wide the after Obama's presidency, the complete polar opposite of President Trump was elected. Now he's hoping to go back to the polar opposite of Biden, but it's just not happening. He's every debate he's making more and more gaffes. He's in town halls. He's making more and more blunders. It just shows that his campaign is stumbling. And if they can't rein him in, he's slowly losing numbers. Now he's still the front runner, according to most major polls. Yeah, but in Iowa, he's slipping. He's not pulling well with younger voters. So if he continues on this track of forgetting things, which Biden's up there in age. If he keeps forgetting things, forgetting who he's on the stage with, you know, not speaking properly when he mentions we're gonna punch domestic violence, like you know It's just not. It just shows the slipping momentum of his campaign.
Yeah, and also I feel like when Biden right now, the majority of mentions of the Biden name in the media is relating to the impeachment proceedings, and you could see how basically Donald Trump has tried to has tried to get dirt on Biden, and it's kind of working. He's not been shed in the best of lights, and you have a lot of people questioning him, and like, was there a few issues when he was vice president? Was he helping out his son? Thing is that like it's not that like if they're true or not true, is that there is that seed of doubt in the voters' minds, and I feel like that really plays with people, especially ones who are going to be either swing voters or people or independents. There's going to be that little bit seed of doubt, and I feel like Trump's already started his campaign against Biden, and it's very much unfortunate because Biden does have a very long run as vice president, as a senator. He's very well spoken. Well, was well spoken. Now he's losing it, and it's quite easy to see. And I feel like the meme that has surfaced over the past few weeks, "Okay, Boomer," applies to him a little bit as well. You know, uh, you're welcome. You're welcome for that one. Moving on to another front runner, Elizabeth Warren.
Oh boy.
Uh,
Oh boy. The two
well,
cent wealth tax. Oh man. I. Mm, mm.
Bo, okay, so what's your issue with the 2 cent wealth tax?
Okay, so I'm all for the idea of like the wealthy need to pay more taxes. Like I agree with that. They don't they make a lot of money, but you got to chip in every now and then. But my God, just oh, okay. The problem with Warren for me is she's too left wing. She's getting rid of student loans. We're gonna Medicare for all, no matter what. We're gonna abolish private health insurance. Now we're gonna tax 2 cents on the dollar of every dollar you make if you make over $50 million or something like that. Which is I get it. It's a drop in the bucket. She's right, but at the same time, the United States is a capitalist country which prides itself on being like for business and really supporting that endeavor and like uh, you earn what you've worked for. So I just think that she's just isolating a lot of people by doing that, and she's going to lose a lot of donations that way. But to her credit, it's really paying off for her with the younger voters. But the problem is, younger voters don't vote. So you can pull all you want with the younger generation, but they're not going to vote anyway. So I just think that she's just like isolating people who doesn't need to be isolating, and it just bothers me that she's so confident in um, that task when she's making tons of money herself. I don't know. It's something about a wealth tax rubs me the wrong way. I just think that we shouldn't be necessarily critiquing people who've, most of them have earned that money. Whereas I think we should be doing like Cory Booker said in the debate, which should be like, going for growth instead of attacking the money we already have made. But I don't know. That's just my opinion. I don't know. Wealth taxes
I have a
rubs me the
question
wrong way.
off of what you're saying. So you say you agree that like people who have more money should be taxed more, right? Did you say that? So
Yes,
like,
I
how
did.
else would you do that besides a wealth tax?
I don't. I would say just like increasing the regular rate, not necessarily doing like 2 cents for every dollar. I think that's kind of unfair. I think it should be like your tax rate, your income tax rate is now 10% or five
Oh, like a
percent or whatever.
step kind of.
Yeah, yeah. I like the system we use now, which is the step.
Yeah.
But I
Okay.
think it should be made more fair to kind of like lower it on the lower class and the middle class, and increasing on the upper class. But I don't like the 2 cents on the dollar. I think that's kind of like taking more than. I know it's not a lot, like compared to. It's really not a lot in the large scheme, but just like that, using that textbook, that creating that precedent, I think is dangerous because then you could go from 2 cents a dollar to 5 cents, and then the middle class has to pay 2 cents on the dollar. I just can see that precedent becoming worrisome, and I don't necessarily like that idea.
I feel like there are some other candidates who pointed out that it's not about specifically getting the people who already pay, like the rich people who already pay their taxes, getting the ones who don't. It's getting
Right.
the big companies who who pay zero tax because
Like
the way
Amazon.
they set it up. Yeah, like for example, Amazon paid and FedEx paid zero federal corporate tax, and they're able to get away with it. And I feel like that's a message that is more that for example for me personally that is that is more relevant in this case, especially for like yeah yes you have the wealth tax per se, and like if the rich are still not going to be paying for it, then what's the point of even having it? But the
Mhm.
thing is that like in this debate, what we didn't see is people challenging her on that. With like all the front runners were barely challenged.
Yeah, Cory Booker tried and didn't really land anything. But yeah, you're right. Biden didn't go after him because I don't honestly think he understands it. I'll be honest. I don't think he was smart to not attack her on something he doesn't understand. Because Warren has been pretty commanding of the economy along with Sanders, but Sanders didn't go after her for it. Even though he supports that kind of legislation, he didn't go after her for it. Buttigieg avoided it. Harris avoided it. Klobuchar avoided it. But you're right. Booker tried. When he said focus on growth instead, and then Warren kind of got back at him saying like, "That's fine and dandy, but we got to pay for something now." So you're right. I mean, people are just kind of like letting her have a monopoly on that idea of taxing the wealth the way they are, which again worries me because if she's polling, as high as she is, if Biden continues on this downward trend, soon candidates might be forced to throw their support behind her because she's the only one who has a chance to win.
Yeah, but I feel like if we move on to Senator Sanders, like you don't see much of a difference between the two. Like in their policies, like they are very similar, and neither of them has started to kind of build a contrast between each other. They're still both for Medicare for all. I feel like, and Sanders actually made this point during the debate of like how the first Medicare for all question went to Warren, even and he got a little bit ticked off, saying like, "I wrote the goddamn bill."
Mhm.
So like you see that kind of they're very similar in their policies and the way that they kind of approach things, but like I feel like they're just taking up their own electorate. You don't have like their polling is relatively similar. Warren's above Sanders, but if one of them drops out, the other one is going to get a lot more voters. And I feel like I don't feel like either of them is giving up ground. I feel like they could go to the very end, but there's going to be a point at which they might, and there's a lot of things that could change. And but the thing is that they could also go for something a bit more moderate. And talking of someone a bit more moderate, Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Um, what do you guys think of his debate performance? Bo?
I like Pete. I thought he did. Of course, this is biased because he's my favorite candidate. I'll be honest, but I thought he did phenomenal. He just really struck home when he said that he's framed himself. He is an outsider. He's a mayor of a small town in Indiana. He has honestly the least political experience on the stage besides Andrew Yang and Tom Steyer. As a
But the thing is, you say that Pete himself makes the point that he has had more executive experience than anybody on the stage, being mayor for over 8 years now. That's longer than Biden's. That Biden was in vice presidency. He has he's got
that's not
veteran experience.
Biden was vice president for 8 years.
Yeah, for 8 years, but Pete's been there for longer than 8 years. He's been mayor for over 8 years now. So he does have like, and that's what he claims. He's got more experience in that sense. He also has got his army experience. He's also got his like he's putting himself out there as somebody who's very much knowledgeable with his stance of him being a Rhodes Scholar, but then also uh, he's trying to show through what he's done in South Bend. Yes, South Bend isn't as isn't a big city. But the thing is that it's something different. You don't have like on what the electorate was looking for in 2016 was something different. And that's why Trump got elected. and you have a feeling that you still have that similar feeling of like disgust and dissent with Washington. I feel like they do like outsiders. Like even you have, for example, Obama, who was, I believe, in his at the end of his first Senate term, that he or second Senate term, I can't exactly remember, but he ran for president very early on, and so is Pete. Pete's going to be 37 when he takes office, and he is like he is the young the young candidate that people could be drawn towards, and that's what he's trying to achieve. But his biggest issue is with the African American voter base that the Democrats have relied on for years. And he's in South Carolina with the black voters in for primary voters. He's polling at 0%. So that is one of his biggest issues as a candidate, and this is what he said. He said he actually mentioned this in the debate when he was talking about how um, he wants to see this as like a challenge. As a challenge, trying to get himself out there. The thing is, like he has tried, and this campaign has not been successful in doing so, and he like in the debate he tried to kind of lean on him being gay and trying to lead himself towards like yeah like I'm like I I understand how it is to be like a minority, but the thing is he's trying to separate how different being, for example, a gay person and being in that LGBTQ minority to, for example, the African American minority who have a history of being oppressed. So it is a very very difficult thing for him to do, and I feel like he hasn't gotten that yet, and he's going to struggle. And yes, he's leading polls in Iowa, but Iowa is mostly white voters, and if he's going to get the candidacy, he needs to somehow get the African American vote because they're just not going to vote for him.
You're right. As I was saying earlier, he's done well in the debate because he's framed himself as an outsider, and he has done so well in Iowa because he's from the Midwest. First of all, he's from he the great. This is like one of my favorite lines he said, like all day, all night. He was talking about how he was from. They were talking about farming subsidies. That was the question posed to him, and he was talking about how like where he's from, people are like really hurting from the trade war and all that stuff, and how he's not. He's the least wealthy person um, on the stage compared to everybody else. He's really like a middle class candidate, and I think he did really well. He defended those who were talking about his, like you said earlier, about his challenge to appeal to the African American voters. But he honestly, I think he's doing really well. The momentum is promising. It looks like he's going to continue to rise, especially with Biden stumbling, as you mentioned earlier. Sanders and um, Warren being unable to distinguish themselves. They're almost running as one candidate. So now that you have Buttigieg being the more moderate, like Klobuchar, which we'll get to eventually, you see the party really being split, like we talked about before. The party being split between socialism and more moderate Democrat ideals. But again, I like Pete.
Yeah, I also like Pete, and I think going back to like what Alexander was saying about his experience, I think that a lot of the candidates was sort of recognizing that he was pulling ahead in that sense and was trying to get him on that front. And I think that he responded to it very well in saying that like on stage, like all of us on stage have over 100 years of time in Washington, and like whatever how much like I don't have any, but Washington is the problem. And I recently in my gov class with school we were studying about how campaigns like the most successful campaigns are candidates like running on the basis of like Washington is bad, we need to fix it. I mean we saw that work in 2016 with Trump with the sort of, I mean I think that's kind of the appeal of the Make America Great Again. It's like also the idea that you were saying that we need someone new, we need something different, someone who hasn't been like poisoned by the swamp, that kind of thing, which I think he'll be very successful at if he keeps playing that card.
Yeah, I feel like another person who was quite successful on the debate stage was Cory Booker. Unfortunately, he he didn't get the questions that he wanted, and he didn't get the time that he wanted. So, like the person who got the most amount of minutes was Elizabeth Warren. On second place, it was Pete Buttigieg. Then it goes Joe Biden and Sanders, and he's trying to get at that top four, but he's just not polling there. He's not getting his like message out or like. But thing is, like he did have quite a good debate performance. Like you the thing is, a good debate performance can be split up into two things: actually being good at debating and having a substantive case for your presidency, and then having the big clips about like getting a zinger on someone, like he did with Joe Biden when
He
there
called him
was
high.
yeah like when Cory Booker said like that he thought Joe Biden was high when Joe said that he's not going to legalize marijuana. But like,
He probably had to have that one planned.
yeah, no, I mean, he definitely did. But you have him doing that, and like the thing is, like his substantive arguments were also quite good, and he didn't like push. It's very weird with Cory Booker because he doesn't have something that stands out specifically for him in his specific policy that he just like pushes, and that's my main issue, like, or something about him. He's an African American. Yes, he's a senator, but you like he's not getting the hype.
Hmm.
Yeah, just Booker's from New Jersey. He's not been very flashy. With like Biden has the name recognition of the Obama presidency. Sanders has the name recognition of being like the socialist candidate who ran as an independent after he lost to Hillary Clinton. Buttigieg has the name recognition of being like the young challenger from the Midwest who happens to trying to be the first gay president. Um, he just doesn't have like that real, like you're saying, that big name recognition, and that's why he's not polling very well. And I think he won't get the nomination. He'll probably end up being on someone's cabinet if the Democrats get elected. But you're right. He's kind of making that claim of trying to appeal to the minority vote, and he's just not. He's polling just as poorly as Buttigieg is with the minority voters, which is ironic. He's just that lack of name recognition is just not helping his case.
Yeah, and earlier this year, he came out saying that he might not be able to continue if he doesn't get enough enough donations.
That's what he said. It's what he said on Wednesday. He's like, I don't have the polling numbers. I need more help.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. He basically begged on stage, saying like, "Keep me on stage." like, it's not looking great. And he's not polling great. He's not doing great in his donations compared to top four. And it was it's very sad because like he seems like a nice guy, but he's not doing great. And I feel like yeah, I feel like if we're looking at someone who's also not doing great but had a great debate night, Amy Klobuchar. Uh, she was I thought she was very good. Um, she she was sharp, and she had one of those moments when she was talking about how um, about discrimination between women and men, and how she was like,
Mm-hmm.
if a woman with Pete Buttigieg's experience just wouldn't make it on the stage, and she didn't. She tried it. She made it into not an attack against Pete. It's just that she was kind of making the point of like how difficult it is, um, how difficult it is to keep like to be a woman in the political sphere, and how yes, we've seen a large rise in women being activists, being elected into office, but it's still a lot more difficult. And yes, you see that, and she made that point. So she she did a quite a good job. And but again, she's one of those candidates who she has qualified for the next debate already, but again, not really.
Yeah, she's trying to be that moderate candidate, and Buttigieg has just done a better job of it, honestly. She's kind of angling that side again, but there's she had her chance. She's had a couple shots in the last couple debates. You're right. She did have that big that big clip. That was her kind of one thing, but she struggled to get a lot of time on stage. Cory Booker struggled to get time on stage, and people like Andrew Yang and Tom Steyer wouldn't even talk to him the first 30 minutes of the debate. It was all Warren, Sanders, Buttigieg, Harris, and Biden. And another reason that's why Yang and Steyer are struggling. Yang has he had that one the $1,000 a month for every American family. He's had that main campaign promise, but that's been pretty much it. He's talked a lot about technology and AI, and we're behind and all that. That's been he's also kind of put his foreign policy on there, but he hasn't really released a lot of opinions on things about healthcare. He hasn't come out with saying we want X Y Z. Here's my healthcare plan. Here's my taxation plan. He's falling behind as again that outsider candidate that he's trying to frame himself behind. He's just falling behind to other candidates. Klobuchar's falling behind Buttigieg. Yang's falling behind Sanders and Buttigieg as well. Steyer entered the race very, very late. His whole claim has been about climate change, right, and trying to combat the Trump presidency with his impeachment petition very early. But Joe Biden had his one good point of the whole night when he attacked Tom Steyer for making all of his money off of coal. That's actually how he made a lot of his money of purifying coal. So it's just honestly the Democratic Party, in my opinion, needs to trim the fat at this point. You started off with 20 candidates. You have more and more candidates entering the race with Deval Patrick and Bloomberg entering the race. Now, and the elections in a year from now, the actual election will be cast. So it just shows that the party needs to really start cutting. Again, Tulsi Gabbard is another candidate that needs to go.
Hey, that's your personal opinion.
No, but I mean, she's very far behind. She tried to justify her meeting with Bashar al-Assad by saying that we need to meet with all of our with adversaries and friends. She got into it with Buttigieg again on the debate stage and just was handily defeated. I think that the Democratic Party needs to step in at this point and trim the fat to your front runners of trim it down to Harris, Biden, Warren, Sanders, Buttigieg, and Klobuchar. Cut everybody else and just start moving on. Just every debate, cut 3 to 4 people, and just until you get down to the primaries where you really only can have 4 people actually have a chance, and it's really 2, but it's Warren and Biden, and then you have Buttigieg and Sanders. Harris is struggling. I mean, she's still kind of up there, but I think she'll more likely be someone's attorney general if the Democrats
or VP
win. Or VP, right? Which I think Buttigieg has a good shot of being VP too, depending on who wins.
Not to criticize our democratic system, but I definitely agree that I feel like we're just wasting everybody's time at this point. We know who's gonna move on, and I don't think we're getting any closer. I mean, I don't think that's enough of a reason to just cut people out, because then there's well, what if something big would have happened and changed everybody's opinion? But still, I feel like we have a really good idea of who actually has a chance.
Right.
Yeah, and I feel like, for example, Tulsi, when she came on stage, the only thing that she was doing the entire time was just trying to do a Julian Castro, trying to attack people as hard as she can, and she went in on things that she really shouldn't have. Like she was trying to attack everyone. It wasn't really coherent. She didn't portray any message that was of any relevance, and it wasn't like it was just a very bad debate performance.
Mm-hmm.
She was very aggressive, but you don't you don't want a president that's overly aggressive because then you're going to get pushed into wars. You don't want a president who is so divisive, who's divisive even within the party. Like if you can't get the party together behind you, how are you going to be able to get America behind you?
Right.
Yes, she's trying to push onto like the moderate side, maybe more of the Republicans or
Yeah, she's
Republicans
pushing more
who didn't
like
vote for Trump.
honestly like center right, which is kind of interesting to frame that as the Democrat. Biden's also done that too with his marijuana stance, but it's an interesting way to go about trying to pull both people.
Yeah. But yeah, so I feel like the last candidate that we're going to cover is Kamala Harris. She was
She
all
had her
right.
moment. She had her moment when Biden gaffed.
Yeah, she did. She had that moment. But like again, I feel like we have this massive pool, and we have the people already on stage. It's 10 people. You're not going to get enough time to actually go into minutia about about what you want to talk about. And I feel like people like Harris, Booker, even for example Tom Steyer and Andrew Yang, they're just not getting the opportunity to talk about what they want to talk about. They're not able to firstly draw the differences between them and the other candidates, trying to push themselves through. They're not able to do anything of substantial value during these debates. Like after the debates, you don't see much of a polling difference. Polling differences come from other factors, other things that are happening outside the debates. You're not going to have a massive shift in people thinking of like, well, she had a poor or he had a poor debate performance, so I don't like him. I'm going to move to somebody else. There's just this large pool of around 60% of Democratic voters who are still unsure about who they're going to vote for, and that's the part that's not helping the Democratic Party with that massive lineup. And you still got people who are not on the debate stage, but are still going for it. You still like yes you had people like Beto O'Rourke who dropped out. But for example, okay, there's been already 10 Democrats that have dropped out, and there's still 18 running. They had 28 people running. They've still got 18 people running. It's insane. We've never had a lineup like this. And yes, there are some people there who are still going strong. Like you got your front runners, but then, okay, I'm gonna be honest. What is Delaney doing? Well, what's Williamson doing? What's Bloomberg and Deval Patrick doing in the race? Bullock as well. Like you have this massive range of candidates, and it's just not helping at all. The thing is, what's really what's really what would really be helpful, especially in relationship to elections, would be for we can see this in. Oh my god, I'm really trying to get this to move on to the next topic, but I feel like, how about this? Moving from one election to the next.
There you
Hong
go.
Kong.
There you go.
That's it. Got it. Finally. It took me a bit too long. But moving from one election to the next, we had the election this week. We had elections in Hong Kong. That is still mass amount of protests. We've got a lot of people being imprisoned, a lot of people being hurt, riot police going up against the protesters. You have protesters locking themselves in the university campus in Hong Kong and basically staking it out. There's been an ultimatum by the police. The riot police are going to storm the building. They've attempted it on multiple occasions, but they've been pushed back by using things like bow and arrows, rocks, homemade like firebombs and Molotov cocktails. They're just holding out as hard as they can, and they are fighting. They're fighting for a democratic freedom. And you saw this in their latest local elections, where you had the pro-democratic leaning candidates win with a massive majority, and you also had I think it was a record turnout in Hong Kong of people voting in these elections, and this is it's it's incredible that this is still going on, and China has tried to do things about it, and they've actually uh, by the rules of the Chinese government, the two-state the okay one state two government
Two
solution.
systems.
Yeah, like the two system solution, that you have a military base, a Chinese military base in Hong Kong, but they're not allowed to leave that military base unless the government of Hong Kong asks, and they have. So the actual Chinese military are currently in the streets, but the thing is they're doing a more of a humanitarian role of cleaning up the streets, trying to get things moving, trying to get business going again, because I believe there was an estimate a few weeks ago that the Hong Kong economy has lost $5.8 billion worth of either revenue or of economic growth because of the protests, and they don't seem to be stopping. Like people keep going, and they're trying to push for democracy and freedom. And you had the bill pass in the United States Congress and Senate, but you have pressure from China on Donald Trump just not to not to sign it into law and veto it, because they're trying to get a trade deal done. It's it's a whole massive issue, and the people of Hong Kong are in the middle of it. And I feel like personally, there's just been no support. Like you understand that Hong Kong used to be part of the British Empire. Then they had this 40-year transition under China, and the UK hasn't done anything about it. They are not supporting their democratic ideals. You have the United States who are not supporting their democratic ideals. But to be honest, what do you expect from Trump? Like,
Right.
it's not.
Speaking of Trump, I actually did a report on this in class about the Chinese pressure to make him veto the bill. The President of the United States has caved to Kim Jong-un in Singapore and Hanoi on nuclear testing for North Korea, in exchange for trade sanctions, even though that North Koreans have continued nuclear tests. Okay, so failure number one. He caved to Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, saying that no Russian interference, and trusted Russian intelligence over his own intelligence. Okay, failure two. He's losing the impeachment inquiry. Although there's questions about whether or not he'll be removed from office, he's losing in every hearing we've seen. Okay, he's losing on immigration. He's losing on trade. He's losing with the military, which is our story coming up. But he's not winning on many fronts. And now you have another foreign despot of Xi Jinping pressuring the president of the United States, the leader of the free world, the most powerful man in the country, and the world. Sorry.
No. I feel like he might have lost the title of most powerful man in the world at this point.
Right, which is incredibly concerning about the future of the United States, but I digress. To veto a bill that had bipartisan support from the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. When was the last time we had bipartisan support on anything? First of all. Like, absolutely anything.
A funding bill, and that's only after shutdowns and such.
Right. So you convinced the Republican-held United States Senate to, it was like a wide majority of people voted for this bill. You convinced the Senate to vote for this bill, which has been where Trump's allies have been able to hide. McConnell and Graham, and have been able to, be energized in the Senate. So you have the president being told by a foreign country how to vote, theoretically, which is so concerning. Now, the only reason I could see Trump vetoing this bill that would be positive is if he publicly vetoes it, saying that it would hurt our trade relations, and privately gets the Senate and the House to push it, to override his veto. The only way this works is if he says, China, I'll publicly veto this if we get this bill done. And if the trade doesn't come within 2 months, then that Trump really got swindled again. But the fact that a foreign despot told the President of the United States, basically threatened him, saying that, we'll continue to hurt your economy unless you vote this way, is just incredibly concerning. It just shows that the United States, under the Trump administration, is on the decline. We're not respecting the international community. We've lost our allies. We have countries like Turkey growing closer to Russia because they don't trust the power of the United States anymore. You have Hong Kong being abandoned by Western allies. You have countries like Ukraine, being abandoned, and then us manipulating the government of Ukraine to help us investigate a political opponent, because if we don't give Ukraine money, they'll get destroyed by the Russians. But so it's just the fact that we just used our title as world policemen. We've been the defender of freedom and the defender of democracy, to use that so whenever we feel like it or whenever it benefits us, which is the exact opposite of American ideals. It's just incredibly concerning that just the decline of American morals and ideals under this administration is incredibly concerning. It's incredibly concerning, and it just, Ryan, I want to ask you, as someone from your state, Mr. Jim Jordan has made such waves of this impeachment inquiry in this regard. I mean, how do you feel about Hong Kong and China and all this?
I mean, personally, I just think, I can't speak for my entire state in any means, but
I don't know. I just think it's funny that him and I brought impeachment. I don't know. I just thought Jim Jordan, great segue.
It is a great segue, but I actually did want to talk a little bit about Hong Kong, because I just think it's incredible how much resilience the people of Hong Kong have. I mean, this is how long has this been going on for? 6 months, 7 months? I don't know, something insane like that. 3 months? No.
Okay. So we talked about Hong Kong in our first episode, which was.
But it's been going on before
September.
then.
But no, but that was a few.
That was coming on
weeks
with
after it
the
started.
fact.
Yeah. Yeah. Here comes the fact check.
But regardless, I mean, it's been, even if it's just 3 months, that's a really
okay. The riot started on June 9th. So June, July, August, September, October, November. No, that's 6. That's 6. Ryan was right.
All right.
All right.
Thank
Please
you.
continue.
Let that be a lesson, Alex. Anyway, I think it's it just shows the resilience, and I think it's something that really should be it should be recognized, because specifically, this is a local election that just happened, and about 70% of eligible voters went out and voted in Hong Kong, compared to American local elections, which have around 20 to 30% turnout-ish. But even 70% turnout in local elections is equivalent to around 70% turnout in our national presidential elections. That's insane to me, how politically active these people are, and it makes sense because pretty much their lives and their freedoms depend on it. But I just wanted to mention that, because the extent to which people are getting involved is I don't want to say great, but it's good that they're taking it into their own hands, because nobody else is helping them.
Yeah, and another country where people think that nobody else is helping them, and which candidate Sanders describes as a military coup, Bolivia. So, in Bolivia, we talked about this on our not on our previous episode, because that was an impeachment special. You should go check that out. But
Shameless plug.
Hey! I'm plugging our podcast, okay?
On our podcast.
On our podcast. I feel like if you're listening to this episode, I feel like you should have listened to the last one as well. But I digress. We had a so President Evo Morales was. He was pushed out under a lot of pressure, and he fled and got asylum in Mexico. What happened afterwards was Senator Jeanine Áñez Chávez took power and created her cabinet. There have been this was after mass protests, but that still continue, because you had Evo Morales, who was a a fighter for the indigenous people in Bolivia, who who had issues with universal suffrage, um, who were being oppressed, and under him they were given equal rights. And now this has become a little. The protests have become a bit more about uh, a racial divide from the people, the indigenous population, to the people who've come from Europe during their expansion in South America. And so now the reports have come out, and some people are saying that it was actually a military coup that pushed out e, Evo Morales, and that people aren't really. We're still unsure about what exactly happened in in Bolivia because of how messy it is, and it's building on this kind of these protests that are happening across the world. And like yes, it's Bolivia, but you see this very similarly happening in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Iran, in the Middle East. You had uh, you had protests, for example, in Ukraine in 2014. You have protests right now in Hong Kong. It's a global phenomenon. It's not localized. Yes, the issues that they're fighting for are localized, but it's more about freedoms. Uh, Firstly, rights, their own human rights, but also economic freedom. You see, for example, Hong Kong is more of a rights based, and now after the change in presidency, you see the more of a rights based, not a revolution, but protests in Bolivia. But you also have economic freedoms, like you see, for example, in Iraq, Iran, Lebanon, and what previously was in Bolivia. So, for example, in Lebanon, you have a continuation of the protests, where some protesters have actually been killed by some of the by the police, and it's becoming more and more unstable. Yes, you had an entire change of the cabinet and the presidency, but people don't trust anybody new. They want someone absolutely entirely new. They don't want somebody. They don't want anybody who had relation with the previous government, because there is no trust. It all started from taxes on WhatsApp messages to now becoming a total push for change. And so this kind of a change is just seen throughout the world. And I kind of want to move on to something that was seen in Iraq. So in Iraq, you see people protesting Iranian influence in Iraqi politics. And we saw a leakage of documents, a wire that was within the Iranian equivalent of CIA, uh, which show specific instances of how Iran has been influencing Iraq ever since the United States left, and even when the United States was still there, of buying off people, of trying to influence leaders, especially ones that are affiliated with the United States. And it is incredible how easy Iran was able to get away with this. And now we see um, mass protests in Iran relating to increasing gas prices, and that sparked again a mass unrest. You have the Iranian government who has come out and said the protests are over, but they're not. People still in the streets. Hundreds of people have been detained in Iraq and Iran. Over 100 people have died in these protests, and it all keeps going. So I know I've been monologuing for a little bit, and because this is an issue that I'm quite passionate about. And so, what do you guys think, especially specifically about Iraq and Iran and the way that that's turned out?
I like how you were talking about how the WhatsApp messages in Lebanon, I believe, uh, sparked protests. The rise in public transit fares in Chile, fueled the protests. It really just proves that like it's the last straw is what these things have been. That these brewing underlying issues have been existing in these countries forever, and that's what finally broke the camel's back. Again, what happened in Hong Kong, tying it back. Hong Kong has been China has been trying to exert its influence more and more over Hong Kong ever since the transition. Now, they go one step too far, and the entire country of Hong Kong just uh, wraps around this issue to fight back. And same thing with, Iran shut off the internet. You can't shut off the internet on a bunch of young people and expect them to just be okay with it. Especially when young people are the kind of driving force behind changes in Iran. Um, as American and Western theorists believe that Iran's youth are being more anti-government. Now you've really tipped them over the edge with this kind of action, which it's concerning. But I think it's also encouraging that Iran is finally acting on its own without having necessarily foreign influence. Although the Iranian government claims its foreign influence is fueling these protests, that perhaps internal change is imminent to hopefully bring the country onto the world stage again and not have it so isolated and so antagonistic. Ryan,
Yes,
thoughts?
Bo. I think I mentioned this in the last episode when we were talking about these protests, but I wanted to bring it back up because I think it's something that's really important. Is that, like, sort of how you were saying, it's something so trivial, like attacks on WhatsApp messages, and these governments are so afraid of what has ultimately occurred. They're afraid of dissent, and a lack of support, so much so that they won't even entertain criticism like this. And that's sort of the root of the issue, is that when this isn't even entertained, the people feel all the more unrepresented, and ignored, especially because these things are so trivial. Like, how big of a deal is it to just change the text from WhatsApp to something less controversial? And I think that the fact that these governments won't budge on these specific things really just demonstrates um, the way that these governments are moving towards, like, authoritarianism, and how they are digging themselves into a hole by not even entertaining thoughts of change or reform, and ultimately it came back to hurt them. So sort of like that, yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like it wasn't just that it was the WhatsApp in Lebanon, the WhatsApp tax was controversial. It's it's just that it was symbolic of a country that is one of the most indebted in the world, and a country that was not doing well. You didn't have a booming economy. You don't have a booming economy in most of these countries that are fighting for economic freedom. Like, the only booming country out of the ones that are currently having issues is Hong Kong. But even they have got a bit of an economic issue because of the protests themselves. Like, yes, it's yes, the protests and the people really want change. But firstly, the biggest issue with these protests is that they don't have one specific leader. They have ideals that they want to portray. So, like, it's difficult for a protest to become revolutionary unless you've got specific ideas, you've got specific organization, um, and you know it's very very difficult. And I feel like a lot of the people who are protesting, they want change, they want a revolution, they want to see how things can be changed, how things can be absolutely just changed to the core. But it requires organization, it requires strong leadership, and it requires a uniting message. And talking of strong leadership and a united message, that we don't really see in the upper echelons of the United States government. Bo, would you like to introduce your favorite topic?
Ah, yes. So, President Trump has recently pardoned a U.S. Navy SEAL who's been accused of war crimes in the War on Terror, um, which has drawn backlash from um, the Secretary of the Navy as well as the Chief Admiral of the U.S. Navy SEALs, with them supposedly going to resign. Now they have denied this, but Navy Secretary Spencer has considered quitting over Trump's demand to stop an internal military justice probe into Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher, which, if those who aren't familiar, military justice is completely separate from regular United States justice. Like, they have their own law code. Certain parts of the Constitution don't apply to the Universal Code of Military Justice, so there's like different issues there. But basically, military justice kind of handles their own cases without much federal interference. However, the president did interfere when he pardoned Navy SEAL Edward Gallagher, who was accused of murdering an ISIS militant in Iraq in 2017. Gallagher was acquitted for the murder, but was found guilty of posing with the dead prisoner's body, which is a war crime. However, Trump pardoned him. The Navy was upset about it, and instead, was probing him and trying to figure out if he should have his stuff taken away. But now that Trump's interfered, then the Navy is considering. Some are even calling this is a radical claim, but some are even calling that the Navy is throwing down its anchors, which is those who don't know, it's kind of a legal mutiny where the Navy is kind of resisting the president's actions by not doing said action. And it's just interesting that Trump has lost support of the military again. He lost the support of Secretary of Defense Mattis. He's out. He's been replaced by Dr. Asper, who was Secretary of the Army. He's now losing the support of the Secretary of the Navy. He's losing the support of the Navy SEALs. It's just Trump's losing his base. He appealed to the military, and he appealed to farmers, and he appealed to the middle class in the 2016 election. Farmers are just struggling hardcore because of the trade war, which other Democratic candidates have taken advantage of with attacking. The military, now he's isolated them by, instead of letting the military handle discipline on its own like it's done for centuries, he's interfered again, like he did earlier in the year. A big no-no, because the military likes to do things the way the military does. It has its own universal code of military justice for a reason. It doesn't get involved with petty politics. It likes to stay separate from that. And the middle class is now not seeing the big tax breaks that were promised to them with the Trump tax breaks. So I don't know, my monologuing is being confusing, and in conclusion, I'm deeply disturbed by this and really wish the president would just stop. The military, in my opinion, should be left. The military shouldn't be made political. It shouldn't necessarily draw interference from the president unless it's necessary. It's very obvious the military did its thing, said he was guilty. They have the picture of Gallagher posing with the body. It was pretty obvious it was a cut and dry case, and said the president had to interfere. And
I feel like president was trying to increase morale and trying to okay, I'm just theorizing here, but trying to increase morale, trying to get the troops on the ground to support him, that they could do whatever they want, that Trump has their support, but it massively backfired for him. It's the Secretary of Defense is basically asking for the resignation of the Chief of the Navy, and it comes back to what we talked about earlier about morals. The United States Army and Navy and Air Force, the Department of Defense, have got their own morals, their own rules, their own code of conduct, and that they follow religiously. And when somebody from the outside comes in and says, no, the thing that you've been doing for the past 100 years is wrong, because I just decided it to be that way. It's never gonna never going to be good. And it is very unfortunate of how Donald Trump is treating himself. And I'm really happy that Chief of Navy still hasn't resigned, still keep his post. He's still going strong, and it's people with morals that we see come out to talk about in the impeachment hearings, and um, and the ones that are maintaining the morals in the United States government. And on that note, I feel like we are going to end this episode. We thank you very much.
In conclusion, U.S. government, please come back. We need you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
U.S. bureaucracy, you're my only hope.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Yeah,
subscribe on YouTube.
Yeah, subscribe on YouTube. Download our podcast on Podbean. Also subscribe there. And thank you very much for listening. And we will see you. Well, we won't see you. We'll see each other. But we'll see.
You will hear us.
You'll hear us. Oh, Jesus Christ. You'll hear us sometime next week-ish. We're still not sure about when, but you'll see. The episode will come out. Don't worry. Okay. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.